Now Fiddler. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, go Freddie. That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not believe them. Marshall skips away, Marshall's still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to a sober episode of Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast that owns a rugby league tie tasteful enough to wear at a funeral. Pre-recording live and sad at the Sports Best Friends studios, I'm your host, Big T, of which whom views are my own and of which is deeply saddened to bring you the news. This is the end. It was inevitable. Everyone who's been listening for a long time, they heard it coming. First Chip Jones, then Laverne and Shirley, Eamon, all of it was leading up to eventually this ending, a closing of the chapter of TVT. Yes, of course, I'm referring to the ending of the double-digit episode numbers here at the Voluntary Tackle, and now we reach for the champagne at the wake. We turn and cheers to the 100th episode. We are now in a class above most NRL players, because, of course, most NRL players, almost 90% of NRL players, don't reach 100 games. But not fucking us. Sorry, Tim Maltson. Try substituting your broken body parts for larger, hairier, and less talented podcast hosts. That's how we extended this career. Now, although COVID has taught us, or particularly me, to enjoy drinking alone, and how, I do have drinking buddies at this auspicious occasion. A man so humbled by Eden Park over the weekend, he might not even bother to reference the smaller kangaroos this week. It's Xander Risotto.
So what are you talking about? Don't have any recollection of anything at Eden Park.
And what are you pretending to be drinking at the moment with me, sir?
I'm pretending to be drinking on a nice drop of Dan Aykroyd Skull vodka, because that's the way I roll.
Oh, cheers. Clink. And leaning against a greasy table, looking at a Triple-Ovich to dance with, it's Media Watch Mario.
How you going?
Well, thanks. Which seductive dance moves will you throw down first when you find one?
I'm definitely just doing the dance from Pulp Fiction, the one with Uma Thurman. So, very cliched, all those 80s sort of moves that they pulled out in the 90s there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you pulled that out a bunch of times in the 90s watching that video.
No question.
I'm so bespotted by the Trebojevic brothers that I'd Cardi B them. And by that I mean I'd let them nut it on my ass, and then say I'm glad that they came. Then when I see those brothers, I'd let them run the train. And of course, you should look up what running the train is on that crazy website that tells you what double entendres mean. Yes, anyone who's had the pleasure of hearing BT on other platforms would know that I would never say these things on Sports with Friends or Chasing Kangaroos, but the spirit of TBT compels me. And I do that, of course, by wearing a beautiful Big T's tee at the same time. On tonight's show, we have a bunch of rugby league fan legends here to celebrate the ending of the double digits. Eamon, yeah, baby, call me Daddy Brown returns. Jaaaarnis _ Mateus and David Hypothetic Hunter. And first and foremost, itching to refer to Hitler or get embroiled in an out-of-court settlement for verbal abuse, please welcome Daddy Brown.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so great to hear that voice. Now, sir, I do want to know how you're feeling about the Roosters. I know you're not seeing too much of the game at the moment, but I've never seen a team death wobble and look so successful. So I'd love to hear your take on it.
Well, look, if I'm talking what are the chances of the Roosters winning a premiership, I have some pretty clear answers on that. It's zero. We have zero chance of winning a premiership in 2021. Even if every other team was simultaneously struck by lightning, it would still be close. That is the nature of our third string squad. But I'll say this, and I'm sure Xander will concur with me here. The heart shown by the club this year, I think I speak for a lot of Roosters fans, it's actually been a bit of a milestone year. I just feel like I've never been more proud of the club. It's almost as though they've been to war and most of the platoon's been wiped out. And Hutch is just crawling over the line into the finals. It's a proud moment.
Well, I'm really glad that you've reached that loser mentality that the rest of the bottom eight and us feel, where you can pretend to be proud about a loss. It's great that you finally succumbed to that feeling.
Thank you, mate. Yeah. And look, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, if I enjoy the party of mediocrity that you've set up for me over there at Leichhardt. I've joined the room. And look, in the same way that you've obviously referenced Tim Moulton and a whole host of mediocre players that have worn your strip over the years, may I present to you Drew Hutchison, who I never thought I would be ever watching a Roosters game and be cheering for someone who essentially looks like a fat accountant. He's wearing the number 6. To think Brad Fittler once wore the same jersey that Drew Hutchison is wearing, it's certainly a fall from grace.
And when you say I present you, Drew Hutchison, you probably will be presenting to the Tigers in about 3 years for $500,000 or more. So I can't wait for me to be supporting Drew Hutchison wholeheartedly. Xander, you were referenced in their risotto. What are you feeling about the Roosters currently?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm probably a little bit more hopeful than Eamon. I do kind of think of, 1 in a million sporting shots from the dark, and I kind of have this hope in the back of my mind. I mean, the reference to half the sides being struck by lightning did strike me as being a particularly, I suppose, a curious choice of words, given that the team that can't be beat at the moment is called the Melbourne Storm. So I feel like that just makes it better. Yeah, it's going to be a hard one for us to win. But I don't know if they just need to channel maybe their inner Mighty Ducks or something. I'm not too sure, but there's a movie in there somewhere for them if they manage to win the premiership from here.
There's two things.
I think
honestly, do you mind if I jump in here, Xander? I think you just need to kind of just lower your expectations a little bit. If you really want to win, forget about the NRL and maybe focus on the egg and spoon race. Because I think there are still some sporting events that the Roosters could be victorious in. Potentially,
I hear Hutchinson is brilliant at the egg and spoon race.
Well, the problem is Roosters don't even make eggs. We're not even going to get this game started. Unbelievable. Now, I'm going to pick up two things as well, Cookie Risotto. Often when people are trying to convince themselves of something or lying, they would start really high. So you might say, do you like the Roosters? And you go, yeah, I do. And then you say, do you think they would win? And you went, yeah, I think they would win, which is how you started at the beginning of yours, which is a problem. And the second thing you said is, I love your logic around the mascots and things. So if everyone gets struck by lightning, the Storms get stronger in the same way that if my team was attacked by tigers, they would somehow come out a better team. And I see that you're kind of in the same line of thinking as Eamon, that the first grade team's not great. So I can't almost see where you're going with this, but I'm not too sure. What were you?
Look,
before you were really interrupted by. Okay.
To be fair, that analogy on the mascots, I mean, the Melbourne Storm's logo is basically, a Greek god holding a thunderbolt. So I mean, I just feel like they could probably handle it because they literally are.
You're confusing them with human beings and their mascot. I think we've come to the crux of the issue here. And I don't actually think that is Thor. I think his name is
that's a Norse god. I said a Greek god.
His name is Blaze, I think. It's the most ridiculous thing you're ever going to hear.
Whoever he is, I'm sure he's a cunt because he's in purple.
Okay, great. Anything else, Rizzo, you want to say about the Roosters?
Wait a second. Can we dig a bit deeper into that Mario observation? Anyone that wears purple's a cunt. I got to tell you, the Wiggles, Jeff and the Wiggles will be very disappointed with that.
I don't know. His ex-wife, who still has to work with him every day, probably thinks he's a cunt. She just can't say it.
The song "Wake Up, Cunt" doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
It really doesn't. I'd just like to interject and say you were talking about an egg and spoon race. I'd like to point out that right now the Bulldogs are in an egg and spoon race, and they're all out of eggs.
We're just mixing so many analogies.
Yeah,
That's great.
That's what we do.
Final word on the Roosters. Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say it's going to be a long shot, mate. But I have not completely given up hope.
Well, could I add some an extra 2 cents to this? Because, I need to defend, it's my mighty tricolour club. I need to defend them because I feel like I've probably been a bit too hard on them early. When I said they have 0% chance of winning the premiership, that is true. But that doesn't mean they can't beat anyone, particularly the Parramatta Eels. I'm really confident of beating Parramatta anytime we play them. They've basically got nobody up front. Junior Paulo's one cheeseburger away from being a 70s Elvis Presley. And Nathan Brown, honestly, cannot catch a single ball. He couldn't catch COVID if he was in Bankstown, frankly.
Oh, great. Well, I can...
Unfortunately, the only way Parramatta and the Roosters get to play each other now is if they both make the grand final. And I think the chances of the Roosters getting there are significantly higher than the chances of the Parramatta Eels.
Mario, I will say this. This is hot off the press. Coach Brad Arthur, I don't know if you guys have heard this yet. He's trying to turn the season around by changing the hotel that the squad is staying in. That is a real story. And if that doesn't show you the depths of absolute shit that club is in, then nothing else will.
Wow. That is a sad state of affairs.
I have a feeling it's your lack of go forward, not your lack of great room service is why you're shit.
But did they upgrade them or did they take them to a shittier one? Maybe you're saying you don't deserve it. Take a crappy one, a hotel.
I think he's
something.
It sounds like he's taking the phrase "change is as good as a holiday" a little too literally.
Yeah.
Their defense was the other night.
Now I can confirm that the Storm's mascot was called Boom. Guys, it finally came to me. Something that Mario would love to do to a cunt is a boom, but there you go. Or it might be something that he and his wife call. We have a boom boom. Mario, you haven't had a chance yet to talk about the Roosters.
No, I think the Roosters are in the situation where they could possibly, they're in the reverse Simpson situation from the baseball episode where they're relying on a series of misfortunes to occur to everybody else for them to succeed. It's not out of the question. And as Eamon mentioned, the Roosters are still capable of beating anyone. They got bloody close to the Panthers. The Storm showed that, they've showed the last couple of weeks that they could be beaten. They haven't yet, but they could be. And the Roosters, who's to say the Roosters won't be that team to do it? I don't, they've got to get past, they've got to finish fourth or fifth and, see what, where the chips fall. But, I haven't ruled the Roosters out, not like the way we'd all ruled out Parramatta a good month ago now.
I will say you just mixed your Simpsons analogies, though. I mean, it's not the baseball analogy you're after. It's the Drederick Tatum versus Homer Simpson analogy that will see us win the premiership, where he's asked to visualize how you'll beat Drederick Tatum, and it's through a congenital heart failure. I think that's our clearest path.
And Xander, can I give you something I can't visualize? And that is, I'm not sorry to harp on this, I can't visualize Drew Hutchison on the commemorative glazed plate. I just can't imagine him being on any of the posters. Like, could you imagine people who are 7 or 8 years old following the game and they've got giant posters of Hutch on their wall, as a 2021 premiership winning number 6? It's more fantasy than anything that Marvel's ever put together.
To give you hope there, Eamon, Brodie Croft came within one game of being immortalised as a grand final winner. So anything can happen.
Yeah, but he did he?
And was Lachlan Moranta in the 2015 Brisbane team? Imagine that guy getting a grand final. Any scrub can win a grand final with the right pieces around him.
Yeah, Anthony Milford almost won a grand final. There's something. Wow.
Big shout out to Daniel Mortimer.
Exactly.
He was in the 2013 Roosters top 17. It's a fact that most people forget.
The other sad thing that's just about to happen to the Roosters is they're going to lose your winning game streak. I think the 1975 Roosters have a 19 winning game streak, and Storm are now on 18.
It does, T. I'll tell you why. Because the Roosters, the eastern suburbs of Roosters back then, they got that record in a time when the game was a real hard man sport. They had people in their sport who actually had their genitals ripped clean off their body during that fucking win streak. The Melbourne Storm can't say that. I mean, they've played a couple of paper-thin defences in teams like the Dogs, who aren't even really recognised as a rugby league team anymore. They've been demoted like Pluto has to being a dwarf planet. They're not actually a rugby league team. So in a lot of ways, the record should never stand a test of time because they didn't come through the game when it was a fucking blood sport, mate.
Well, I mean, there is some kudos to that in that there have been an insane amount of records broken in this PVL year with the Rabbitohs having their all-time point thing going. There was another club that just had I think it was Manly, just had their all-time point scorer eclipsed in a season. So there are statistics and records, dropping like flies this season just because of the sheer amount of points. Melbourne have also done the best for and against ever in the history of the game. And
yeah, I was going to say there's been a lot of records tumbling. The most number of dickheads on the NRL executive, that's been shattered this year.
Yeah. And is that why you're not watching much PVL? I know that, NRL is, I know you've obviously had a child, but some people would use football as an escape. Is that something that you're trying to escape from there?
Well, I enjoyed your Freudian slip there, T, of calling it PVL instead of NRL, because, of course, many have made the argument that the game has changed quite seismically. But I've been, regularly keeping in regular updates with Xander Risotto, just trying to find out each week if the game has been restored to normality. Of course, he tried to assure me that from week 2. He was just lying to my face. But over time, I think it actually has been the truth. And I have started to ease myself back into games over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I haven't watched any complete rounds, but I've actually liked what I've seen. And it's been enjoyable to watch. I got to tell you, the Smokies for me are the ones that for the premiership are Manly. I'd love to get Mario's thoughts. I know we're meant to be talking about the Roosters, but Manly, Mario, you must be excited.
I genuinely am. I mean, I'm sad we didn't beat the Storm, but I think considering we kind of played badly, we still held them out to a reasonable score. And, and then, I mean, the Parramatta win, big deal. Parramatta suck. I was more excited about being in the game with the Storm than I was about beating Parramatta. I'm not even saying that just to piss off Parramatta fans. It's genuinely how I felt about it at the time. If Tommy Turbo doesn't play this week, which seems to just keep changing twice a day at the moment, I think that'll be a good test for us against an understrength Canberra as well. See how that goes. I mean, the problem is that Melbourne game is the only actual hard game we've had in a while, apart from a few that we've, thrown away with stupid losses. I think Penrith was the last decent opposition we had. And that it's really hard to just know where we're at. But the issue is that in this PVL era competition, there's only 6 good teams. And with Parramatta off the boil, there's only 5 good teams in the whole competition. So everyone's really got a soft draw ultimately.
Well, there's 2 things I want to pick up there. First of all, there was only 2 teams at the beginning of where the PVL ball was at its height. And as the 6 agains have kind of come down a bit and everything, the game's kind of gone normal a bit. It's now blown out to 5 teams, or 6 teams, as you just said. So there's a very good chance that by the end of the season, the Tigers and Knights were made at 8 teams that are really vying for it. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up was I've got all these wins and I don't know what to do with them. I don't even like the wins now. I've got to tell you, as a poor person out here on the streets begging for any kind of scraps of a W, you sound like Mario Antoinette saying just let them beat Eels. Like that's the kind of way that I would get my way into the 8. Not all of us have cake lying around, Mario. Some of us have just got to beat the Bulldogs on the way, and that's hard for some of us, okay? So stop throwing your W's around so easily.
Let them eat eel cake, is that it?
Yeah, let them beat Eels.
Big T, as Australians, should we spend every day of our lives apologising for the fact that people in poorer countries are poor, or should we simply appreciate what we've got? The reality is Manly have got what we've got, which is a history of success. The West Tigers have, a history of abject failure and 9th place. So you just need to accept that you are where you are, and you can strive for better. But I'm not gonna bring my own self down just by constantly apologising for the success that we've had.
And so you watched a lot of Scott Morrison press conferences recently on Facebook now that you're in lockdown, or did he just come through there recently? I'm trying to work out where this rhetoric or attitudes come from. Unbelievable.
I'm channeling the mid-2000s Mario.
Mid-2000s was when we won a grand final, mate. So it makes no sense to me. Daddy Brand, is there anything else you wanted to bring up before you go, sir?
Yeah, look, I know my time's running out. So in classic TVT fashion, I was wondering if I could take us completely off topic. I've been watching a lot of Netflix lately with rugby league temporarily out of my life. Been watching a lot of docos, so I thought I'd recommend a couple. But first thing, I know you're a big fan of docos, T. Have you seen that one? It's a pretty gritty war film about an Aussie platoon who gets obliterated. It's called Tales from Tigertown. It's fucking full on. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if they're calling it Tales from Tigertown. I think it should be called Saving Madge's Privates, because I've got to tell you, he does not come across too well on that show.
Really? I couldn't find it on Netflix, but found it on Pornhub because I have just been mazzing over it for the last month and a bit. I love that documentary. I just watched the episode 3 tonight. It's fantastic. I think Madge has come off really well, and I've come off because of Mad's a bunch of times. So I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I just think he also is. I mean, there's swearing and whatnot, but I actually think he was really underrated. Still, the editing doesn't show much of his tactical things, but in this episode here in episode 3, we actually started to hear him talk plays and reading defensive lines and giving some great advice in halftime. So I'm loving it. Are you genuinely not liking it, or just trying to be funny?
So you're saying that Madge is actually discussing tactics and strategy. It's obviously been done in post-edit because he hasn't done that during his career as yet, but I can certainly determine. Look, I've got to tell you, I'm with you in terms of being compelling viewing. It is gritty and it's compelling. I just wonder as a Tigers fan, how many people are watching that and thinking, I'm feeling better about my club now, because it is so fly on the wall. It is so unvarnished. And you can kind of see firsthand why the club's in so much shit at times.
Yeah, I mean, I loved last episode where they had, he said, shut the curtain, which was, sounded like it was supposed to be a hard man thing to say, but it was delicate. And the entire staff are stuck outside in the room outside, but then they cut into the room because the cameras are in there, but just no support staff. It was incredible. It was supposed to be a private moment. It was so good. And then him just publicly drilling BJ Leilua, and then we never see him again, is just also fantastic. No, I think it's great. I think it's just great to see an honest impression of what's happening. All of us have already lived those losses and wins, and so we're just seeing how a coach responds to them. And a lot of us are seeing that he's responding in a way that we do. We're emotional and writing every bit of it. And it's not that no one cares. It's just that it just hasn't worked yet. And so it looks like it eventually will. I just thought that the strategy and tactics that he would have employed, say, around 2014 in the preliminary final where he beat Manly, and they also beat the Roosters in that final on the way through to winning that grand final in 2014. So, I don't know if we throw too many barbs around about Madge's coaching career while we're going for those two powerhouse clubs.
Just a couple of points on that, T. One thing, it's not much of a tactic to say to Greg Inglis at his absolute apex, hey, mate, can you grab the ball and just score for me, please? Thank you very much. And the other thing is, by the way, they've got a guy called Mitchell Pearce on the – run at him. Why don't you run at him, because you're much bigger, you're stronger, and you're smarter. I don't know if you'd call that a tactician's dream, and I will just say this. That documentary is the sort of rugby league equivalent of Black Mirror. It's like, what would rugby league dressing room look like if the entire universe went backwards?
Yeah. Well, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Mario, have you watched it yet?
Not a minute.
Okay. Good chat. Great podcasting. Risotto, have you had a chance yet?
Oh, I've seen the first episode. I agree it is compelling viewing. I'm probably halfway between you blokes on it in terms of the way Madge comes off. I definitely get his passion and his will to have that club succeed, but it just feels very futile. It's just really it's kind of painful. I just feel really bad watching it, to be honest. It's like, I'm sure there's a German word that describes how feeling pain for watching somebody else fail, but yeah.
I'm sure Tommy Radonicus was full of passion and swear words, wanting his team to win. He was still an utterly useless coach.
I feel as though Big T has an Andrew Fafita joke lined up, and I feel like I'm going to be outfeated. Should I try and jam one in just to say I've got one in as well, or is it?
Please, it'll be no. You should, if you've got one, please. But the public miss you and your antics, so please do it.
Antics is in inverted commas. That's war crimes, some people call them. Look, Andrew Fafita, obviously in an induced coma, it's pretty full on. But when he was lying next to the sideline and gasping for air during the game, I remember thinking, geez, that's an extreme way to silence his anti-vaxxer views.
David, hypothetic Hunter, mate, it is a pleasure to be speaking to you in your natural habitat, a recorded podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, Mr. Tiger. How is everyone on this joyful 100th episode that is occurring right now?
Yeah, man. As we said at the start of the show, I've decided to commemorate this by drinking some Crystal Skull Dan Aykroyd vodka. So thoroughly enjoying my time here.
And media.
I'm having a good night, enjoying drinking a bit of Fireball myself, because what else should one do on a Monday night?
Oh, Fireball is the greatest. Thank you for reminding me about it. We've done a very good job of not talking about the Eels, so let's continue to do that and turn our attention, in fact, to something dear to our hearts, which is, of course, the NRL media. And I do mean that honestly. We are a part of it, a small part of it, in fact, or maybe an insignificant part of it, but we certainly do contribute in some way. We also digest it, as hard as it may be at times to digest. And there are large parts of it that are wonderful. Shout out to Tales of Tigertown, although it has been torn apart a bit on this podcast tonight for some reason. So this topic that is and set of questions that you are super keen about, DH. I'm going to get your opinion on it first. And as you know, and as you are, you're a positive guy. So let's start with, who is your favourite rugby league commentator or media personality of the past? Which I think means, and you can clarify, isn't doing it right now.
That's what I meant by the question. So thanks very much for having me on the podcast, guys. I thought that it'd be very apt as the hypothetical RL guy to have three questions. One that was the past, one that was the present, one was the future. So you can hypothetically talk about things that we liked before, we like now, and we hate later. And I really did want to say big congratulations to 100 shows. Unfortunately, I can't talk to the master Eamon himself. He's put me on some kind of, like an AVL or something. I don't know, he just doesn't like talking to me anymore. But I'm very excited to be talking to the king of Tigertown, the Italian stallion himself, and the old donkey over there. What should I call you, Mario?
The old donkey over. I think the old donkey over there is great.
I was hoping the Italian stallion was describing me, but I suppose I'm not the one who's used risotto as a chosen surname.
Sorry about that. Yeah, unfortunately, Signor Risotto is the Italian stallion. I should probably answer the question. I got asked the question, and I went, well, I want to just give a little bit of a shout out and say thank you for having me on. In terms of, I mean, I really kind of posed these questions because I wanted to get your opinions on them, but I'm happy to give an opinion. In terms of old style commentary or media personalities, I think Rex Mossop is the one that I enjoy the most. Not because he was accurate or because he was in any way, a brilliant brain or anything like that. I really just love the way he talked about rugby league, about the passion. And I love when you watch an old game and you can tell he was an old forward, and you could tell that, he hated it when forwards didn't act like forwards. So that's one that I reckon is really good. But what about you guys?
Yeah, Mario, you do yours.
From the past, this old donkey was a big fan of Daryl Eastlake in the brief period that I got to hear him in commentary, not just on chat, not just doing the wide water sports, people riding tires down the hill and stuff. There was a brief period, unless my memories escape, fooling me, that he did some rugby league commentary, and I was a big fan.
I think he did Origin stuff.
Game.
Yeah. That's what I remember, his commentary in that too. And Risotto, what about you, sir?
Yes, I was going to say the same as David. Actually, Rex Mossop is who I remember most growing up. And he definitely did bring that old school vibe to the game. And we had Eamon talking earlier about the difference in eras between the successful Roosters side that is about to have its streak broken by Melbourne, and insinuated that was a hard as nails, combative game, whereas Melbourne are basically winning in the touch football era. And I think that Mossop was reflective of that difference of eras.
Genital tearing, I think, was the way that he described that era, and
ball tearing area,
rather than genital touching, which I guess is what this one might be. The wrong answer, you've all got it wrong, by the way. Of course, the right answer is Matt Nable and his burning light of stardom that shone through. I think it was 2018 or 19, where Fox had him for a few games. That was the greatest commentator of all time, and we were lucky to live during that period. Now, trustworthy.
I was wondering who you would go with the Tiger, and I was like, I don't know who you're trying to talk about. I mean, you could. I was thinking of any ex-Tigers that could have been commentators that would have been.
Junior Pearce. I still think Blocker does a good job now. Benny Elias still commentates.
If you think Blocker does a good job now, you're expelled from the show. does not do a good job.
Braith Anasta, Tigers legend.
Oh. Yeah, you can have him. Jesus. Braith and Blocker. Kill me now.
I love Block. How trustworthy? Well, I'm going to go back to you, Hypothetical Hunter.
Yep.
How trustworthy and valuable is mainstream media to you currently? Well, and how would you describe the state of it?
It's funny, because a lot of people are whinging about it at the moment and going on about, Channel 9 has fallen off a cliff and Foxtel's following them afterwards. I don't know. I think they've always been a little bit. I've always been the ones that have been a little bit annoying, or that sort of thing. But it seems to be the agendas that I'm more worried about. And I know it's going to sound really weird, but it feels like ever since Phil Gould and Andrew Voss on their boots and all got the touching goal line. What was it called? The corner post. Ever since they got that rule changed, it's almost like, well, we've done that. Now let's see what else we can do. And it's they get their own personal agendas and they want to change the game from the outside. And I get really sick of, oh, that's not a penalty, or oh no, this shouldn't be the way it should be. We should change that. We should change that. I just want them to leave it alone and just appreciate how good the rugby league is at the moment. And I know a lot of people out there, and I'm going to go to new media here, to social media. I know there's a lot of guys on social media now going on about how the game's broken and the PVL ball. And look, it's not perfect, but I don't think it's as bad as people are going out to. I think everyone's getting a little bit alarmist as well. So just 2 points there, I think, in the way that the media is at the moment. But just generally, I don't really watch Channel 9 anymore because I've got KO. And I thought the Foxtel was a little bit better. I think it's slightly better. But I kind of feel like there's something missing. There needs to be an alternative. I know there's two, but there needs to be another alternative there.
What would you imagine would be in that alternative?
Well, I've put this out there before. I think, and I can't remember the exact sport. I'm not sure if it's NBA or NFL, but many years ago when they were in a bit of a doldrum, whoever was in charge of that sport actually said that what they did is there was 3 major networks, and they went out to all 3 and said, bid on our rights, and we will give 2 of you the rights, and then the next time it comes around, the one who misses out will get the last right of reply. So what he basically did is he just rotated through them for a period of years, and he forced them to get better. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just only just money. It was whoever gave the best coverage, whoever was the most positive about sport. And I think we need that. I think we really need 1 or 2 other media. Like we used to have in the old days, you used to have ABC on the Saturday. And I'm not saying that ABC should have rugby league on it, but it feels like it should be just more than just 9 and Foxtel. If we can have someone else, then maybe enough of the positivity will come through. Maybe the NRL needs, I know it's hard in a contract like that, but maybe they need to have some benchmarks that they have to meet. Otherwise, they'll give it to someone else.
I love that idea. I think that may have been basketball, because I know basketball's played on lots of different channels, but I don't know the story. I'm just assuming that I like the idea of having on 3 different networks, and then the chat that then happens on social media is, geez, I hope the Tigers game's on Channel 7 because I love the way that they cover it. And then, as you said, that then makes 9 and 10 look at what they're doing differently, or what Channel 7's doing differently, and also try and compete. So that's a great idea. Risotto, I'm going to go to you first, though, because I have a very weird memory of you and I tweeting on the Roosters game. I think it was the Roosters game, and you guys had just scored. I think it was a Knights game. Someone had just scored, and immediately Andrew Voss and whoever was with him, was probably an Asta, were talking about a penalty that had happened 3 or 4 plays ago rather than talking about the try. And I audibly shouted at the screen going, like, shut the fuck up, just tell us what the hell happened. Like, commentate the game, not the penalty that you're still blowing up about. But I'm sure that was in a comment that you were talking about. Am I remembering that right?
Look, I feel like that happens to me every week.
Okay.
It's usually involves Braith and Asta or Blocker.
You got a bent those two, don't you?
There are a few commentators who I think are just particularly bad at their job. Blocker, Gordy, Braith, who actually commentate the games. I have great difficulty with. That said, and I hate to do this, but there are still worse standards in other sports. I'm looking at Sean Maloney over at Rugby Union, possibly the worst sports commentator on the planet. I think that the quality of coverage is definitely mixed at the moment. There are a few really good commentators. I think Dan Ganane can be a little bit over the top, but he's a good caller. I think Warren Smith is still the best game caller, but in terms of media coverage more broadly, Yeah, there's definitely a couple of traditional old school personalities from the game, like Phil Gould and others who have an axe to grind and they push that. But then there's equally some really good journos who still do quality pieces on the state of the game. Like Andrew Webster, I think, still does a bang up job. Whenever he writes about rugby league, he always gives really insightful pieces. He's now off social media because maybe for the same reasons we're talking about here. And then there's to a lesser degree, I think, some good pieces here and there. Like I think Matty Johns with his podcast, they tend to be quite good and insightful when he speaks to some of the other journos. They can sometimes have some good bits and pieces here and there. Like Paul Kent, I have this weird love-hate relationship with him. I think he actually can be quite insightful on some things, but the rest of those teams, like James Hooper and what's his face, Booze Cheeks, Buzz Rothfield, I think they are scraping the bottom of the barrel big time. And it would be what you were referring to before about having this cycle through other teams. I think fresh blood is desperately needed because those are classic examples of just jobs for the boys. They're part of the News Corp sort of masthead, and they've just thrown them in there because they write for the papers. They're not insightful. They're not interesting. They're not intelligent. They just add nothing. I think if there was a period there when was it Dave Smith was the CEO of the game? They were courting ESPN and they were looking to build out their digital platform in Australia. And I was desperately hoping that they were going to develop a kind of Netflix for sport in the way that Stan is attempting to do now, and would throw some serious effort into doing building a portfolio of streaming sports that would include rugby league and have some of that high production quality and fresh ideas. Because I do think that the Fox and Nine have a tendency to kind of go to the same people, and it's just a little bit hit and miss. Last thing I will say is I think Nine are at least trying to do some semi interesting things with YouTube. Their Freddie and the Eighth things. It's very fly on the wall kind of stuff. It's not like polished or professional, but it does have a bit of a charm to it. Watching Freddie and Joey talk about footy, but yeah, there's a fresh injection of new ideas from a third party would be welcome.
And Mario,
that was quite long. Sorry.
Okay. And Mario,
what was the original question again? I mean, I listened to everything Xander said, but what was the actual question we were addressing?
I'm so sorry to wake you up.
The current state of NRL media.
Favorite commentator and current state of rugby league media.
Okay, so favorite current commentator. I would probably agree Warren Smith is probably my current favorite commentator, though my God, do not follow his takes on Twitter. The guy he's the only one more cooked than Vossi at the moment in terms of their Twitter takes. Wow. In terms of the state of the media, I think there is what is it? Nine Media, which was Sydney Morning Herald, whatever. They've, as he mentioned, Andrew Webster is very good. News Corp have Nick Campton, and he's really good as well. Unfortunately, I think those two are the exception to the rule, and most of them, most of the writers, they might write a good article here and there, but they don't care if it's good. They'll just happen to do one good, and it's too hard to tell mixed in with the 6 absolute garbage ones they throw out just because they've got to meet the quota. And it just means that I can't respect them as writers. Whereas people like Webster and Campton, they both actually stop and think about what they're writing, and they give a crap that what they're saying matters. And so I struggle to read anyone apart from them most of the time. I'll occasionally on the NRL.com, there's occasional articles on there that are pretty good. That they're not clickbait sort of stuff. They actually have a bit of substance to them. In terms of what I would like to see, I definitely want to move away from Channel 9. Foxtel, they're so rooted to Foxtel, the NRL, that it's hard to see them understanding that things like Stan, Netflix, all these other ones could be options for them. A mix of a variety, and let them share responsibilities. That could work. I mean, considering 7 and 10 once shared AFL back in the day, it can be done. I would like to see another network, preferably Channel 10, take over, just because I preferred their Big Bash commentary so much more to the Channel 7 commentary. And in particular, this is very left field. I want to see Ricky Ponting commentating NRL, just because I think he's the best bloody commentator in Australia right now. I think if he put his mind to it, he would be a very good NRL commentator. Maybe not the play-by-play commentator, but the Gus Gould role. I would really.
He's a Tasmanian. Like, I don't know if he knows anything about this.
Phil.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I do know that. I get that he probably isn't even an NRL fan. I have no idea. But
He might be the best person then to come and look at the game because he doesn't have to deeply rooted as something else.
I just view him as a prepared, consummate professional sort of person. I mean, Bruce McAvaney wasn't an AFL player to the best of my knowledge anyway, but he's still the best AFL commentator. I view that Ricky Ponting could potentially be that for us. It's never going to happen. That's just a total pipe dream that I've just plucked out of thin air. But yeah, that's me.
Bruce McAvaney also never ran the 800 metres in the Olympics, but he did a fantastic job of calling Kathy Freeman when she did. So I'll take your point.
Well, 400 metres for Kathy Freeman, but yeah, I agree.
She ran the 8, but he didn't run any of them. So, yeah, okay, they're good ones. And the last one then is hypothetical you had, and finally, if you could make any changes to rugby league media, which is kind of where we're leading into it. Then is there anything, David, that you would also add other than trying to split it across more TV networks? Actually, the thing I just realized about the American one is there are so many channels there that it's a much easier prospect because there's so much more cash in each one. It would be hard to kind of split it over 3 in Australia because Channel 10 even just struggles to get neighbours going. But anyway, it's still a good idea.
Someone said that to me the other day, but the timeline that I'm talking about where they split it over between 3 channels was back in the 1960s and 70s when there wasn't as many TV channels in America. It was a different kettle of fish. That's one of them. One thing that I do want to, I think it almost goes back to the last question, is I want to just congratulate everyone out there. I congratulate you guys on her shows. I want to congratulate everyone out there, and I'm going to include myself, all the people on social media and all the podcasters that actually are doing the job that the media should be doing. And one of the things that I think we really need to do, and you mentioned Tigertown, that's really good. And, Xander mentioned, that other show with Freddie and Joey. I think we need more long piece journalism. We need more of these kind of series, and I've heard people before say we need 30 for 30 for rugby league. We have so many stories. We have so much history in rugby league. And I think what we need to do is we need to actually tell those stories. They've started to do them a little bit, but I think they need to dedicate a bit more time to doing things like that. And I think that would make it a whole lot better. And I think just even things like supporting, I think we need to support the independent kind of media as well. Like, I think some of these things that are being done, and I'm going to mention them because I always mention every podcast I'm in, but the Rugby League Digest doing the Super League War, Michael has spent, I don't know, countless hours doing the research for that. They've spent hours and hours doing a comprehensive Super League War, podcast series. That should be something that is a 30 for 30 or some kind of video documentary. That should be. It's one of the most important things to happen in Australian sport. Not even just rugby league. It was pivotal in sport, and we have never got a comprehensive story from a major media outlet. So things like that, they need to find the stories that we're all interested in and put a bit of time into them and actually create series for them. And I think things like that would be really helpful in media. Obviously, I mentioned going to extra networks. That's probably helpful. I think the streaming market is something that they shouldn't have walked away from a couple of years ago when they did sort of kind of just sell it off to someone. I think they need to look into that again. And I know that people go, "Oh, well, you're not going to make any money," but it's one thing that, and I hear it all the time on other podcasts, is that not everyone is going to sit in front of Channel 9 or Foxtel and watch it on normal television. You've got to have the ability to send yourself overseas as well. And I know we've got an app, that Watch NRL app, but extremely too expensive for people in developing countries where they really want to sell it to. Because if you can get those sort of people playing it, if we get a wider amount of people from different countries watching it, then they're going to sell jerseys in other countries. If they can crack America, they're going to sell millions of dollars worth of jerseys if they could do that. But they need to put the investment in, and I just don't think that they want to. That's what I want to see them do. But I just don't think that they're always just looking at the next television contract, getting the next TV contract, getting the money, and the networks are like, we want the ratings. They're not thinking about that. They kind of need. That's why I kind of think that the NRL should run the digital arm, and they should still sell to Channel 9, Channel 7, Channel 10, whoever it is, and Foxtel, but they should be up on YouTube putting. Look at this fantastic thing that has happened. Get it viral. Get it around the world. Get people watching clips of rugby league, maybe not the whole game. Get them interested, and then say, hey, here's this product. Cost you $5 a month. You could watch all this action. And look, here's jerseys. You can buy this guy's jersey. And one other thing I find interesting in England, and I'm not going to say the English rugby league is by any stretch of imagination good at what they do. But one thing they did when they did Super League is they gave every player at the start of the season one jersey with their name on the back. And you can sell that jersey. If someone wants to go buy the Tedesco jersey, right? Yeah, sure, he's number one for the Roosters. What happens if next year he moves position or something, he plays in a different position? I mean, it's probably a bad example, but if you're a big Roosters fan, you want to buy the number one Roosters jersey with Tedesco written on the back. I think that's what you want if you're his fan. And I just think we're missing a trick by not doing that as well.
We'll give the NRL a little bit of credit. They do have their own YouTube channel, and they do put highlights on it, official highlights on it. They do have links there back to their website and to the NRL draw. And so they do try and, whichever part of the thing is trying to do that, they do it with YouTube and things. I'm not taking it.
No.
Your point was
I just
bigger
think
than that.
They could do a bit more with that.
They do YouTube.
Yeah, what I'm thinking they could do, and not
and I know that, I only know that because so many players that I talk to that aren't in Australia. When I ask them, how do you know about football, or in India, they're like, we watch highlights on YouTube, and often it's from the NRL. So they have most of their watchingness is from people who can't afford, as you said, that expensive watch NRL app.
And I think that's fine. They've stumbled across it. That's great. One thing, and I know it's going to sound really stupid, it just popped in my head, and I thought about it a while back, and I remembered it again. And I know it's a really stupid thing to do, but when you want to sell a game in America or you want to sell something like a product, what they do is they call up one of these social media influencers, like a YouTuber, as my kid would call them, and they go, hey, have a free thing. Can you do a video about us? Why don't we do that? I don't understand. I mean, I know that this is some American kid probably knows nothing about it. You give him some cash and go, hey, watch this compilation of these tries and comment on it, and we'll give you, whatever we're going to give you for it. And he's got, half a billion people watch him. I don't know how many people watch a YouTuber, but if you can get like 1% of a YouTube, or one of these really influential YouTubers, people to actually start watching rugby league, we would have 3 times the audience we have at the moment.
Xander, did you have anything that you wanted to add about changing the rugby league media?
If it's a broader piece about media strategy, there's a ton. I've banged on about it before, but I think the trick that the NRL's missing most is video games. I mean, if I were in charge of the media strategy in the NRL, I'd absolutely do all the stuff with YouTube. I'd have a digital pass where you can get a free subscription that'd probably give you, maybe 2 games a month for free, and then you'd make them sort of box office, big ones. But I would also invest about $20 million into making a Madden-esque, video game and having that linked up to everything, so that you could buy a membership when you're selecting your team on your PlayStation 5 or Xbox video game, and then having really heavily involved community activities where people compete, and it links into membership bases and like fantasy teams, management squads, and all kinds of stuff. I would be massively leveraging that and the growth of esports, in addition to all those other things. But I think that is the biggest trick they're missing for me from a multimedia strategy standpoint.
I was going to say, Xander, with your video game, is that kind of links back into my one as well, because if you put a video game out there and then you send it to a bunch of these guys who play video games and comment on them, which is after
100%. Yeah, becomes because people on esports they have
Or
YouTube
Twitch.
channels dedicated to that.
Yeah.
Or Twitch. There's so many angles there, and it's you personalize it. You enable people to create their own characters or to be their own characters. It requires investment, which is difficult. Like it was the kind of thing that if they'd done it a few years before COVID, they've sunk $100 million into just trying to keep the game alive, would have been viable. But it's a bit of a harder sell at this point, sadly.
Yeah. And then
I don't know.
The one thing that if you talk to a lot of people who like American sports, like the people who like the NFL or the NBA in Australia, a lot of them will be because I bought NBA 2K or because I bought NBA Jam or because I bought whatever it was as a kid and I loved it and I started watching the sport. So, if we could appeal to people in other countries that don't know the sport to play this as kids, they may grow up as rugby league fans.
Yeah,
and it's a sport that is ideally suited to a video game format. Like it's structured in a way that it should work. Sorry, Big T.
No, it's okay. The John Olympic Rugby, I think it was in '95, one of the greatest games of all time. I remember playing it incessantly back in the day because it was a fantastic gameplay for this style of thing. But also, 98% of my knowledge about NFL comes from playing NFL Quarterback Club '98 on Nintendo 64 back in the day, and to this day, I still play 2K21. I was playing it earlier today because I struggle to sit and watch an entire game of basketball because it feels very back and forth. I love the game, but to sit and watch an entire game's a lot for me. But I'd play that video game for hours because it's really enjoyable. And the incredible stuff they do with video games these days, when you hit like my career, it starts you in high school and you choose what you look like and whatnot and what your name is. But it starts you in high school and you do a journey through high school trying as hard as you can with all these video clips that they've incredibly designed and this storyline about you into college and relationships and what kind of person you want to be. And you haven't even started playing NBA yet. But you're just slowly building that up. You're so invested in this. Instead of just playing it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, winning a game and then turning it off, they've really worked out how to keep someone in it and on it for a really long time. And it's really, really smart. And the things that they would learn, also the data mining they'd be able to do from just you choosing small things about that player's life is incredible. So the video game thing's a great idea. Mario, did you have anything you also wanted to add?
I'll tell you what. No, I felt myself about to go off on an NBA tangent, so I won't do that. What I'll say in response to the topic about social media, YouTube, all these other things. The one that's bothered me for a long time is once upon a time, not that long ago, there was a whole lot of people on YouTube, people on NRL Twitter and stuff who had created YouTube pages with a whole bunch of awesome highlights packages because the NRL wasn't doing it. And the NRL went and basically got them all booted off YouTube just because they said, it's our intellectual property, blah, 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 which is just so short-sighted and stupid. Whereas you look at the NBA and they dead set embrace those things. The amount of people who have their own YouTube pages dedicated to NBA highlights and you can find links to them and stuff like it. The NBA basically embrace it and encourage it because they know that what those people are doing is spreading their brand for free. NBA don't have to pay for that. So why would they discourage it? And NRL is so short-sighted on that front. At least they're starting to do some more YouTube stuff, but it's been a constant source of frustration. And, one or two guys working for NRL controlling a YouTube page is all well and good. But if there's 20 people out there wanting to do stuff for free that would be helping spread the word, then why not do that? I mean, even stuff like Big T's tees. I could just imagine NRL coming out and saying at some point, you're using the image of Morgan Harper on your T-shirt. You don't have the rights to that image, so you're going to have to, give us all the profits from that picture. I'm not saying they're going to do that.
Yeah, but Mario, hold on. But if the great thing is the art's not good enough to really ever say that it actually looks like Morgan Harper. So that's the great thing about being actually not very good at it, is that it's hard to actually say that's definitely him. Winning.
I should point out that I'm actually wearing my Big TT at the moment. I just thought it was appropriate.
Oh, shut up. That's so nice of you. Well, just in case, now that you've heard all of that hypothetical, Hunter, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, look, nothing on the topic. I just want to congratulate you guys again. And I hope to have you all onto my podcast again at any time you wish to come on. I hope to come back on again and talk up other garbage to you guys. And, look, I think the Eels are still specials, guys, and we'll leave it at that.
Finish with a comedy.
Lastly, tonight, Jaaaarnis_Mateus, the golden second cousin of the podcast, the man that swans in to his sister's birthday, and all the cousins go crazy because they've not seen you in ages, and because last time you got really drunk and embarrassed yourself so much that you became a legend. So great to have you back. How are you feeling, sir?
Yeah, good, mate. I think my drunken antics last time resulted in me suggesting that Queensland would win the Origin series. So there's no regrets, no regrets there at all.
Yeah, and the Dragons are going really well since then as well.
Well, no, I did predict that Newcastle would take our spot in the 8. So I mean, look, us losing out isn't a surprise, but Newcastle stepping up, I think maybe this drunken haze has resulted in some benefit. But an auspicious occasion, gents. I'm very proud to be associated, albeit at a guest level.
Now, you talking about Dragons and Knights and fighting over the 7th spot while the Tigers lock in 8th has meant that we've lost half of our audience, but that's okay. You've asked a question which fits the said drunken second cousin perfectly, and I want to read it verbatim. Which dictator modelled their career on PVL the most, and why did Nathan Cleary's shoulder charge, which is a massive issue for the ongoing credibility of his glorious reign? Now, I'm going to need you to answer it first, just so that everybody else can understand what the hell you're talking about. So
I was going to say, can we get an interpreter?
Yeah. So I was just saying, like, my view is that PVL. Because I have to also mention other podcasts on this podcast. I'm mad into the real dictators at the moment, and I think Gaddafi and PVL have very similarities in just coming up with some kooky ideas. And
can I just reiterate the views are our own before we keep going? Great. Yeah, PVL, Gaddafi, keep going.
Allegedly or hypothetically or whatever gets you defamation. And I actually think that the disparity in the Volandis ball, I think, is tarnishing the reputation or creatively thinking the way that Gaddafi would occasionally just rock up in a glorious suit. However, I actually think that the judiciary is going to be, if you will, the Arab Spring, to take that a bit further. In that I generally think people will start losing interest in the game if the judiciary don't start let's just say fairly adjudicating sort of charges from the lesser known teams or lesser teams compared to the really good teams.
Well, first of all, I'm very impressed by your foreseen Middle East knowledge. Risotto, how are you feeling so far about this analogy? You're keeping up?
Yeah, look, I like the idea of mixing dictators, but I'd probably pick a much more obscure one if it was up to me. In terms of crazy ideas and eccentricities, I'd probably pick myself a Tokugawa Tsuneyoshi, who was one of the Tokugawa shoguns of Japan during that closed-off period, and he made insulting dogs an offence punishable by death because he was particularly keen on dogs. And as a dog lover myself, I actually have a bit of a soft spot for this guy. But just in terms of imposing personal quirks and things on an entire society, that strikes me as being very PVL-like.
Well, I'm incredibly out of my intellectual depth. So, Mario, do you have any idea? Can you keep going with this incredible analogy?
Well, in true voluntary tackle style, I was, of course, immediately thinking that we had to bring Hitler into this in some way. But I've decided to go a bit more recent, and I have started to equate Lord PVL with the man himself, Donald Trump. The way he gets a tame media on board to just peddle whatever utter bullshit he just spews up in the morning. And that's just what we all have to accept. And any dissenting voices that are shouted down as fake news, then to me, I think that they're basically the same person. And I want to know, has anyone seen them in a room together?
No, I guess that's true. Although I've never been in the same room as Donald Trump, and I'd hate for you to start to think that I'm Donald Trumpish. Jaaaarnis, is this where you were imagining this would go, back to T-Rum?
Well, I actually think that Trump has a point, because you can't call people supporters actually insane when AFL's allowed to continue to propagate as a force against evil.
I never looked at it that way. You have a point there.
Yeah, no, you're not half crazy after all. And until that cabal it continues to exist, you've certainly got my view that that maybe they're onto something. But yeah, look, as I said, I think that I just like the Gaddafi approach anyway. That's my view. I think that he just has elements of eccentricities that only PVL can come up with. But I do think he's going to come undone by something that's not entirely his fault. I think people are just going to get the shit sooner or later and be turned off the game altogether as a result. But yeah, that's my 5 cents worth.
Here's my dictator, and it's a little out of the box. I'm going to go with a primary school teacher, which are dictators in their own way. And if you think about the way PVL talks down to people, but feels kind of loving and nurturing, and people would say afterwards, well, he saved us and he's the best, which is kind of how kids talk about their teacher when they've got them at the time. This is the best teacher, I love you, whatever, that kind of crap. And then there's always some kids, and the kids I think in this analogy are the media. There are one or two kids that are naughty and don't really listen, but really most of them are in tow. And then in the playground, they get a little bit, I don't really remember. And then they come back to the room and, that's right, we're supposed to be, this person's in charge. But the whole time, everyone has an underlying knowledge that this can't last forever. And eventually next year, they'll have somebody else. And I think that's an underlying current with most rugby league administrations, is that this won't last very long. But me, the media person, Fizz, Buzz Rothfield or Phil Gould or whoever I am, I'll outlast this person. So it doesn't matter too much. I'll placate them at the moment, but eventually I know that I'll last longer than them, which is kind of what the kids thinking through school. How did that analogy wash with you, Jaaaarnis?
Biggest, I'd just like to congratulate you. You're one of the nicest guys on Twitter, and yet somehow you've managed to offend the teaching profession so easily. And yet
during lockdown as well, when they're working the hardest.
This is the thing. I could send out a tweet going, look, I love the teachers of Western Sydney, work really, really hard. And, the response I'd get is, you fucking arsehole. You, on the other hand, can run directly at them and people would go, yeah, the top biggest has got a point. So congratulations on that, mate. I'm impressed.
And I will say that
dictators.
It was particularly, I don't know if I'm alone here on this one, but what came to mind as you described these teachers was the character of O'Brien from 1984, the sort of kindly person that you think is on your side, but it's basically getting you ready for execution. And so, wow. I agree with I agree with Jaaaarnis that well done in insulting all of the teaching profession.
Well, this says a lot more about you guys than me, because I didn't say anything horrible about teachers or PVL. You've all assumed that being a dictator in those situations is a bad thing. Well, we know that those people are doing such an incredible job and need to take on that kind of leadership role and help those poor people, just like the media needs help on their day-to-day trudge through rugby league. So the fact that you've taken this negatively, gentlemen, says a lot about you. Particularly Xander's one, that was quite nasty. I'm worried about how your primary schooling went.
I tell you
what. And at what age you read 1984?
You have basically taken right-wing Twitter and just run with it there, because you've gone out and been insulting to a group, and then you've played the victim when you've been confronted with your own crime. Yeah. So well done.
This is Paul Murray in disguise.
Biggest, you sure you're not a Dragons fan? Just playing chance, of course, a Dragons fan?
No, unfortunately. I mean, I used to really like the Dragons, but at the moment, just that whole barbecue thing. Yeah, I love their supporters. I'm the opposite of Glenn Blakely, where he says the only thing worse than the Dragons is its fans, or I'm the opposite. I don't mind the Dragons and I love their fans. So I think it's a great line that Glenn says, but I wholeheartedly disagree with it. Mario, you did your thing. Okay. Is there anything else that we want to say before we lose Jaaaarnis?
We're not going to talk about the Cleary tackle, just out of interest?
Is this because Marcus Sivo has been banned twice for assaulting charges? Said that it was fun.
No, there's a genuine point to it, which is I think that if Ravalaar has been banned twice for over what would be 8 weeks and hasn't wrapped.
Oh, sorry, I meant Ravalaar. Sorry.
Yeah. But my point is that means any shit that Kaufusi comes out with in the same day as we lose 2 players. I genuinely think that the rest of, I think the judiciary is a problem. I'm not saying we should be banning people. I just want some consistency. That word again. And the last time I got into a fight with you, biggest about refereeing consistency. This time, I just think that there's judiciary here that you got to call line up with us. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point? Like, it's a lottery every time someone goes into a tackle.
I don't think there's any
issue. It's all like, sorry.
I don't think there's any point bringing Kafusi into it, because apparently he does play by different rules from everybody else. He's done as many bad tackles, as far as I'm concerned, as Victor Radley has, and yet he never gets charged for anything. But on the Cleary thing, Cleary got the exact right charge and the exact right punishment. And I want Penrith to lose. I want him rubbed out for 6 weeks so that it improves Manly's chances. But the reality is, he doesn't deserve to be knocked out. It was a nothing tackle. He simply stood still and let someone run into him. It was just nothing. The fact that the guy dropped
he braced
the ball,
for contact.
Yeah, the fact that the guy dropped the ball is the only reason that tackle has been noticed. Whereas you want to see and if Ryan Madison can literally, well, not literally, but almost literally take Brad Parker's head off in a very intentional shoulder charge the other day, and he's still only getting 3 weeks, then there's no way Cleary's supposed tackle is worth more than about 1/10 of a week in comparison to that tackle.
Now, Jaaaarnis, I'd love you to respond, but just before we do, I just want to point out that you said the thing about the consistency in the thing, and so first reactions from the other two guys were about their teams. Xander straight away wanted to talk about the Roosters, and Mario wanted to talk about hating the Storm, which are their two teams that we often default to. So it was great to see that happen immediately. Consistency is great, and I think what we agreed with each other last time was just how were we ever going to get there with humans was, I think, what we agreed upon. And I think the same thing's going to happen with this issue here, because the committee is done through a rotating roster of people, and so if you keep the same person there each week, we get into an issue like a quasi dictatorship issue where this one person's making all the decisions all the time, and do they start favouring people, or we'll start reading articles about how they used to love the Roosters as a kid, and that's why this kid only got 2 weeks and the other guy got 8 weeks, and blah blah blah. They rotated to try and make it fairer, whether or not maybe that's at the cost of consistency, but they have ex-players there and ex-officials, administrators, things like that, and they literally have paid lawyers to try and advocate on behalf of these people, and they literally have a real judge who sits there and helps the proceedings continue. So the deputy prosecutor of the DPP, who really goes every day and tries to get people who have committed a crime into jail, then at night goes and represents the NRL and tries to get players pinged for as long as possible. So, the real people really trying to make real things happen there. And so the inconsistency, I think, only comes across one through what lawyer you have, how well those people in real life advocate for you, just like in real law systems that you might be able to get away with or be convicted of things that, and that's an inconsistency just due to humans. And the other problem is that the ex-player or the ex-official or whoever you have on that panel has had a longer backstory that they can't get out of their subconscious or whatever, and they're making judgments based on that as well. So unless you completely change how that system's done overall, it's fundamentally change how it's seen, and essentially write a new law book or whatever that would be called, to create that again. I can't see any other way around that. How would you respond to that?
Look, what I've understood is that we should just take a dictatorial approach and just start summarily executing people. That's arbitrary the way I would like it. Look, I
what's Gaddafi doing now? Maybe he could do it.
I don't think he can do too much, to be honest.
No, I see where your point. I just think that, and I have to make the point, we lost that game. It had nothing to do with losing the ball. The game was gone already. But to me, I differ. I think that it was a pretty straightforward shoulder charge that should come with the same sort of penalties. Not penalties the way I'm looking at it, but should be looked at in light of loading, et cetera, that unfortunately, like Mickey Ravelara, it wasn't even, it was a shoulder charge, but to the ribs. fair enough. If that's the way they're going to interpret it, that's the way they're going to interpret it. But anyway, I'm clearly outnumbered. And
what can I just say that in terms of problems with the game, and I'm going to bang on about this because it was something that really annoyed me on the weekend. There are inconsistencies, and then there are stupid rules. And the king of all stupid rules in rugby league is penalising teams for being a little bit overzealous and dragging a player into their in goal or over the sideline. That does not deserve a potential match-winning penalty. Just make them go back and play the goddamn ball. It's annoyed me so many times over the last few years, but on the weekend, the Sharks Knights game, the Sharks basically lost that game because whereas, oftentimes the referee will be happy to sit there and watch a player stand in a tackle for 15 seconds and then get an offload before calling held. He called held within an instant of the player being touched but not having hit the deck. And then when they, in that single motion, pulled him into the own goal, called a penalty when they were basically, the Sharks said, were 3 tackles into an incredibly dominant defensive set. The inconsistencies around high tackles and contact annoys me, but just stupid fucking rules that make no sense annoy me more. So I wanted an excuse to bring that up, and that was it.
Look, I agree to the point, except that it's the Sharks and fuck them. I agree with that. There's some really dumb, inconsistent. Those sort of rules are so inconsistent,
Why is it a penalty? That's my question.
I'm more than happy to explain to you why it's a penalty.
That's a penalty. There's no good reason.
Well, I'll try and explain it to you. You can tell me afterwards it wasn't good.
I'll tell you why you're wrong. Why you're wrong when you get done. But go on, explain to me the logic.
What happened? Take that rule away, and what do you coach?
Well, you coach players to attempt to take them back.
Yeah, and so then in those tackles when they hit the ground half a meter out, you pick them up and drag them back. The referee blows time off. That's not the marker called held here. They do that again. Your line set. You do the exact same thing again. In fact, they get tackled. It's obvious. They pick them up and drag them back. No, guys, they said come back here. It's now tackled 2, and these people aren't moving. So it's essentially working them on it's a ruck penalty, but it's in the air, or it's a moving ruck penalty. And you do the same thing on a sideline where the tackle's complete. It's hard to work out exactly where the tackle's complete, which I'm going to agree with you wholeheartedly. But if you saw that in the middle of the field where they got tackled and then you saw that guy drag them back left or right and move it, and you saw a defender doing that, you would be screaming for a penalty because that's stupid. The guy's obviously slowing the game. He's slowing that ruck down for their defensive line, and that's the same issue that they had there. Once the tackle's complete, communicating that to the tacklers isn't an issue, but once the tackle's complete, we can't start moving the ball player around, or else it's the same with the leg pull. The moment the person's trying to do the next thing and you impact them in any way, once the tackle's complete, you impact that guy's attempt to try and play the ball, then you are slowing the ruck down, and that's a penalty, which is what's happening there.
That should be at worst a set restart. It should not be a penalty. And the reason is that because there's such inconsistency with how it's ruled, the advantage you gain from basically having a dominant set turned into a 50-meter territory loss is just way out of whack with the crime there. And it strikes me that previously they used to penalise you for passing the ball after the calling of held as well. You used to get a penalty against you if you passed the ball after held, and they realised that was stupid. And it's the same logic for me as that. I think at worst it's a set restart. Logically, you could probably just say bring it out to the 10 if they bring it and they get to play the ball there.
Or in 10, because if they've taken them out in 10, the problem is slowing down that ruck. So anytime you move them around, we've also now set the defensive line. A set restart makes a lot of sense. I'm more than happy to accept that, particularly if it's on the sideline. I think that would be a really effective one if they tried to take it out. And then I think both teams are happy to make that gamble.
Yeah, exactly. It evens it out a bit more.
Because the problem is that Xander looks to that tackle, going on with the tackle near the try line, a bit like a dog. And anyone who does that offends him. And his greatest dictator, of course, is offended by a dog.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, I love
the way you brought that back to my dictator.
Yeah,
that was great.
I want you to think it's poor little Fido on the try line being picked up and kicked, right? Okay. So,
I also saw on the weekend when we were playing whichever team we thrashed this weekend. Luke Brooks had tackled someone who was just about to score. He ends up getting sin bin for trying to rake the ball out. Now, if that guy was still trying to score, and he was on the try line, that guy's given 8 or 9 minutes, just like you were saying, Xander, to try and wrestle his way over to try and get that ball down, and we'd give him all of that time to see if he can score. But in the same process, Luke's trying to play at the ball, and in the act of scoring is allowed to pull the ball out, but was penalised and then sin bin because they thought that was a professional foul he was doing on purpose, which of course I thought he was. I thought he was in his rights to do it at the time. But to hear that referee call held at that time so far away is a problem in itself to try and communicate with players. And that's probably the biggest problem with the 10-metre rule and why for an entire 100 years we've allowed that 10-metre rule to be at a referee's discretion because they're trying to call go. There's a go call that they're supposed to go, and anyone who moves before that go call should be penalised. But to actually communicate that to that many guys across that space, all they do after that is then shout the person's name as loud as they can to try and get them not to be involved. And just while we're on that, can I also compliment every referee that's ever refereed that they can remember that many people's names that are playing, even people who are on their first or second game, that they'd still go, Billy, that's you, Billy, stay out of the play. And as we all know, I have an incredible ability of forgetting people's names, even people that I have loved for centuries. So any referee that can go and play the game and call those people out is amazing. Here's my rule, Xander, that I want to get rid of, is that when you are attempting to catch a ball or at any stage, that if you lose control of the ball and it touches an opposition, I still don't see that as a knock-on. Whoever comes out with possession of that ball has the ball and we play on. If it gets lost in there and then the other team comes up with it, that's now their ball. And if it gets lost in there and you come out with it, well, you came out with it. I can't see it as a knock-on. I struggle to see it with a knock-on. You
are singing my song. That is my other most hated interpretation at the moment.
It
drives me.
It takes away from the sport.
Nuts. Yeah. Like it's not in the air. It's irritating. I think you're right. It should just be a fair contest until it hits the ground. It shouldn't be. But and I've said this on Twitter. There's such a massive inconsistency with the way the competition rules forward passes versus knock-ons. A ball can bounce like an atom into another player and they will never have functionally lost control of that ball and they're like, oh, that's a knock-on. Yeah, you see players put past 2-3 4 meters forward and it's completely fine. It is completely divorced from the spirit of the way those rules were drafted.
Yeah, and that ball carrier running and they're getting into a big tackle and it's shifting in their arm, and then and the poor referee having to look at that, or the bunker looking at it and going, shit, I'm going to have to call that. What a terrible thing to have to try and adjudicate on if a ball being surrounded by 3 men was played out or not, or if it was lost or if someone was trying to rake it. It's a ridiculous rule that would be much better off with it getting rid of. And I think it's used to deserve, like, if it gets fucked around in the air and you still come down with it, like that's more talented than if you just caught it on the floor. Anyway, great. Jaaaarnis, are you happy with that? Is there anything else you want to shout at us?
No, gents. Have a good night. I appreciate your time. I am now going to...
No, we appreciate you coming off the injured bench. What an absolute truth. The 18th man. Unbelievable.
Mate, I'm literally the Dragon season, like it providing it in. The only thing I'm looking forward to is Corey Norman never playing for my football team again. So, yeah.
And then Moses by taking his spots.
Oh, fuck me. Thanks, mate. I'm already feeling shit. Thanks, Andy.
Sorry.
Mario, thanks a lot, mate. Cheers. See you, gents. See ya.
Bye, mate.
See you, mate.
Bye.
I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome or what it is, but I've actually come around on Moses Sambai, and I think he's actually nowhere near as bad as I used to think he was. There's a hot take. Well, that's all we've got for you this week, tacklers. It was wonderful. And until next time, just do what Andrew Fafita would do. Tell the chef when the food is not right, and then he's having trouble swallowing it, and then wait for Buzz Rothfield to trivialize your palate. Good night.
Just a quick note, voluntary tacklers, very sorry we didn't get to some of your Twitter questions. Hopefully we can attack them next week. It is a big regret for the show because there were some jaffers in there. I particularly like the question about Alf from the sitcom Alf and what the rugby league community would be like if it turned out Alf was a sexual predator. Top of my head, probably would have played for the Dragons, but we'll tackle that next week.